Hi everyone, I'm ready to do some Jello Optics, which is my favorite use of Jello and my favorite way to do optics. So what you see right here is a piece of wobbly Jello, which is basically just some finger Jello. I just made the recipe, so I used half as much water as usual so that it's something I can kind of pick up with my fingers. And then I wrestled with it to cut it to a shape that I could get out with a spatula and kind of cut some clean edges. We'll cut it a little bit more so we can play around with the light. But the first thing I wanted to show you was just that I have some different lights, and they teach us something about color. So I happen to get yellow Jello, lemon Jello, because that was the kind that I thought would be the clearest, but also if I got just regular gelatin, that kind of is stinky, so I wanted a lemon scent. So I got the yellow for that reason. And with my green light, it kind of shows up funny in the camera, maybe over bright with the camera. But this green shows up, goes through the yellow just fine. So this is something I'm going to use later. And I've got a red light over here. And that shows up pretty nicely. Comes all the way through onto my finger. So red and yellow work pretty well. But I also have this blue, which I'm quite fond of, but that blue doesn't make it through the yellow at all. So there's the rest of your day to think about that, and why blue doesn't work, but the green and the red do. Turns out your eye is a funny thing, and it's got green and red and blue receptors, which is a funny detection system to look for yellow. But this little experiment with the blue that doesn't go through the yellow and the red and the green that do go through the yellow, that tells us something about our eyeballs. But that's just an aside. The thing I wanted to show you that is especially interesting to me is how we can bend light with the Jello. So if I start playing around with different angles here, that one's pretty nice actually. If I start to go in from this direction, the light starts to take a new direction through the Jello, and then when it comes out the Jello, it goes a whole other new direction. If I go straight through, it tends to go straight, but the more and more angled I make it, the more and more I get some twists and turns, always at one of these edges here. And this is a fun thing to play with Jello Optics. You could use a little flashlight, you could use a little pen light, you could use a little laser pointer, especially even the ones that you use for your pets to play around with, making your cat chase a laser pointer. These are all fantastic ways to do Jello Optics. And if I want to do a little bit more of an experiment, I can start to compare that to light going through a glass. I'll put that over here. I'm at a funny angle. Actually, maybe I'll just tip it at the camera. Let's see if this will work. And one neat thing about clear water is that even though the light's going through, you don't really see it when it's in the water. You just see it on the other side. Okay. The Jello is fantastic for optics because it actually lets us see the light going through it. Because there's all kinds of little pieces of stuff in the Jello, and they all kind of bounce the light back to our eyes. But there's no pieces of stuff in plain old water, hopefully, unless you put something in it. Now I'm going to pour the water out of my glass. The reason I got this glass is so that I could make a nice round cut. So I'm going to try to do this without yelling at it. I'm just kind of making it's like a cookie cutter. Alright. Now we'll see if it actually comes out of the glass. Oh, it did. It's fantastic. So I just made a new shape. And with my new round shape instead of the rectangle shape, I can see what that does to the light. And you notice, instead of spreading out, when I go through the Jello, it actually focuses it to a point right here. So I've just made a lens. Oh my gosh. I wonder if that happens with green light too. Oh, sure enough, it makes a nice little point right there. Even though the green would naturally spread out just like the red. So the red and the green would do the same kind of bending as one another. But we get to play around with what the Jello would do. My blue, just to verify, still doesn't go through circles. Nice. Okay. And one final thing, I got my circle cutter, and we can wonder what would happen if I have just half a circle. Get my camera to focus a little more. Alright. And sure enough, it keeps the light from spreading out. It does focus it down, but not as much as the full circle. I wonder if I brought my full circle, my other half circle back. Oh, look at that. Comes out of this lens, it starts going straight, it goes into this lens, and starts coming back to a point. So here's the rest of your, I don't know, week, just cutting Jello, shining lights, any kind of light you might have, or even just looking through the Jello at the lights coming from different directions. You could try different colors of Jello, different shapes of Jello, different thicknesses of Jello, but they should all be pretty much an afternoon's worth of optics experiments, and you'd be well on your way to pretty much half of your physics degree. You know, you're just well prepared. So we'll see you when you declare that major in physics. Thanks for watching. Happy to get to play Jello Optics.